I'd like to take you out to the west of Ireland to the side of a mountain actually overlooking Galway Bay. One of my favourite places in the world. It's a place called Tober Fodric, or the Well of Patrick. And the Well of Patrick itself is quite remarkable. I have a whole piece on that invitation in that place to drink from a deeper well. But just below it is a column of stone into which all the local archaeological miscellanea of the landscape, the local landscape, the immediate local landscape seems to have been placed. And there might have been an old ruined church there. It's a very sacred site, a very old place. There used to be outdoor masses held there. There's a pattern day every year where the local parish will come up and hold a mass there. But perhaps there was a church there because there are old inscriptions which have been placed into this stone plinth. But the most remarkable thing that is placed into the plinth is this face, this very, very ancient face. It's been given, there are faces like this all over Britain and Ireland, and they're often found in the walls of churches. They must have come from other structures that were then integrated into the church. And they're a very strange phenomena because they're often of a very powerful, often very erotic, feminine figure. Yeah. And it's just as if the Victorians never saw them, actually, because they were so wild. And they're called shielnagigs. But shielnagig is just a name that antiquarians thought up in the 17th century, actually, or one antiquarian. That's the name that we know them by. But who knows what they were called in ancient days? They represent some kind of really fierce feminine energy, and a very powerful, both, it feels like it's both a birthing energy and an invitation to be brave enough to die for what you stand for in your life. Both those kinds of feminine energy, the invitation, the birthing into life, and the invitation to live that life fully. But this face is just the face itself, without the rest of the body. And I remember the first time I ever saw it, I got a kind of shock that passed through me. I was walking down from the well and I just happened to look up and see, for a split second, this face, just as if you would see it by surprise. And the face seemed to speak back to me for a millisecond in a voice that I found really overwhelming and disturbing. And I stopped, just the way you might if you were in a crowded room and someone mentioned your name or said something to you, and you carried on a few paces, and then you suddenly realized something had been said to you, and that your name had been said. And so you stop and you turn around and you look. And sometimes, yes, someone did say something, and other times you'd imagined it completely. So I looked at this face as if it had spoken to me, and I walked back to it, because being alone there, I'd felt this very, very powerful invitation, but I couldn't figure out what the invitation was. And I stood there the longest time in front of the face, in silence. And I didn't hear, so to speak, anything again in that 20 minutes or so that I was there. By that time, my friends were down on the green road just below and were wondering where I was, so I had to leave. So in a way, I said, I'll come back and hopefully carry on this conversation with you. Yeah. Well, I did come up again and again and again, and I came up quite often by myself. I'd often go up there for along that green road for a run or a fast walk, or I'd go up on a winter's day. I'd often go up with other people. I would always spend a few minutes in front of that face, in front of her, seeing if I could recapitulate that first exchange, because I knew an invitation had been made to me that was important. Otherwise, I wouldn't have felt so overwhelmed by it. And so this went on year after year. And there are times where I almost gave up, where just as you do in conversation with people, you say, this isn't going to go any further, so I'll just, yes, it's nice to be in your presence, but, and then I would catch hold of myself and say, say, no, no, there was something there that was really a very powerful invitation. And believe it or not, this dynamic went on privately with my not sharing it with anyone else for 20 years or so. And it was only after a week's intensive work looking into a camera in the heart of Connemara with a filmmaker that I said to this person, let's go round and I'd like to go take you up to Toba Fodric to the well, but I'd also like to introduce you to this incredible face. And I couldn't quite believe that I'd actually made the invitation for someone else to look at the face with me, actually. I mean, I had taken people to that face before, but I knew the way I said it, that I'd actually asked someone to join me. And I was asking myself, why did I ask this camera person to join me to look at this face in this way? One of the things that had been occurring that week in Connemara is that I'd been looking into this camera lens intensively for the whole week, which had been a great trouble to me in my life. I'm very easy in front of a microphone, and I'm very easy in front of 1,000 people in a way. I was never easy in front of a camera lens, and I would suddenly find myself very, very awkward. But during this week, I broke through that troubledness, actually. And on the other side of that troubledness and that awkwardness, for the purposes of this theme, actually, I discovered another kind of intimacy, the same kind of intimacy that I felt on stage speaking to a large audience. This invitation of both of us into this mutual meeting place, which was often arbitrated by the silence that the poetry had created. And so with this dynamic, we drove round from Connemara around the head of Galway Bay and into North Clare and into the Burren Mountains, the Limestone Mountains, and then along the Green Road, walked along the Green Road, and then up to the well. I said a few words over the well about drinking from a deeper place, and then we walked down, and the camera person was ahead of me, and she saw the face before I did. And being a visual person, she was immediately drawn to it, and she got down on her knees with the camera so close up to the face. And I stood behind her, and I realized that the face was looking into the same lens that I had been looking through all week. Yeah. And it was suddenly as if I was on the other side of the lens, experiencing the intimacy that I had felt speaking from the other side of that lens. And it was just as if I was speaking to myself through the face in the stone. And I at last understood what she'd been trying to say to me and what I'd heard the first time. And it was really about that great troubledness around our mortality. But it's not so much as a friend of mine in Oxford who recently died said, it's not death that scares me, it's the process of dying. Yeah. And all the ways we die on the way to our final disappearance in life, the constant request of life to give up what you've been holding on to too tightly, what you've been holding on to too tightly in your loved ones, your children, your partners, your close friends, what you've been holding on to too tightly in the way you define your work and do your work, what you've been holding on to tightly in the way you hold yourself in conversation. Yeah. The ability to get beyond yourself, to let go of yourself, yeah, and give yourself to the meeting in another vulnerable way. So this is the piece. There's a couple of images in it that I wrote. This is the piece I wrote out of that final experience of understanding what this woman in the stone had been saying to me all my life. And one of the images is the image of Loch Ina, which you have heard. If you listened to me last week, you'd have heard the chorus inviting you along the valley bottom of Loch Ina. Oh, love, leave every grief. Oh, love, bring every grief you've carried with you. There's a door beneath everything you'll walk right by if you don't stop to look with that loving heart and a troubled eye. Oh, love, bring every grief you've carried with you. There's a door beneath everything you'll walk right by if you don't stop to look with that troubled heart and a loving eye. And so there's an image of Loch Eina and the beautiful sky above that broad valley. There's also an image of an earthquake that I was in South America, which really shook me and disturbed me at a gut level. I literally had a stomach ache for a week after the earthquake had happened, because the ground beneath my feet had been shaken. Yeah. This ground that I took for granted, that never moved, had refused to hold me in the same way. Those are the two of the main images in there. So here she is speaking to me after all those years, the face in the stone. The face in the stone is a mirror looking into you. The face in the stone is a mirror looking into you. You have seen the slow light in the sky above Loch Eina. You have seen the slow light in the sky above Loch Eina. Beneath you, streams have flowed and rivers of earth have moved beneath your feet, but you have never looked into the immovability of stone like this, the way it holds you, gives you not a way forward, but a doorway in, staunches your need to leave, becomes faithful by going nowhere. Something that wants you to stay here and look back, be weathered by what comes to you, like the way you too have come from so far away to be here, once reluctant, but now as solid and as here, and as willing to be touched as everything you have found. The face in the stone is a mirror looking into you. The face in the stone is a mirror looking into you. You have gazed at the moving waters. You have seen the slow light in the sky above Loch Eina. Beneath you, streams have flowed and rivers of earth have moved beneath your feet. But you have never looked into the immovability of stone like this, the way it holds you, gives you not a way forward, but a doorway in, staunches your need to leave, becomes faithful by going nowhere. Something that wants you to stay here and look back, be weathered by what comes to you, like the way you too have come from so far away to be here, once reluctant and now as solid and as here and as willing to be touched as everything you have found. Part of the invitation I want to make in this conversation this Sunday is the invitation to look deeply into your troubles, just as if you are looking deeply into the immovability of stone, because that's what it feels like to begin with. Almost always our troubles feel like they're this compacted, impenetrable medium which will not allow us in. So the ability to actually feel that compactness, that imprisonment, there are lines by Rilke in two different poems, the great German-speaking poet Rainer Maria Rilke, where he literally creates the physical sense of imprisonment in the poem itself. One of them is where he's looking at a panther which is trapped in a small cage in a Victorian zoo in the center of Paris, in the Jardin des Plantes. And in the old days, big cats would be in these very, very small spaces. I remember actually in India seeing a tiger in a cage, in a very small cage, to my horror. And the way the wooden floor had been worn into a groove by the immense energy of this tiger walking up and down in this small space. In this image of a big cat, which in Rilke's case was a panther, He sees the entrapment of the human spirit. We have this immense energy. Inside everyone is a great shout of joy waiting to be born, which is trapped by the bodily way we're holding the conversation. Or you could say the bodily way we're resistant against the conversation. All the ways we're afraid of our own liberty. I read the lines by Wordsworth that were so powerful last week. I just been reinforcing those lines in my memory this week because it's such a powerful koan, an invitation, and you could repeat it to yourself every day. So I have no shame of repeating it from last week, which is the earth is on a mountainside. He says, the earth lay all before me, with a heart joyous nor scared of its own liberty. I look about. And should the chosen guide be nothing better than a wandering cloud, I cannot miss my way. The earth lay all before me. The earth lay all before me. The earth lay all before me, with a heart joyous nor scared at its own liberty. That's such an astonishing line. One of the great troubles you can look into the compacted stone-like trouble inside you is the way you're afraid of your own sense of freedom, actually. And to look at the way you construct the sentences of your day around keeping the door locked to the next open horizon of your life. With a heart joyous, nor yet scared, nor scared of its own liberty, I look about. And then everything is speaking to you in its own voice. And should the chosen guide be nothing better than a wandering cloud, I cannot miss my way. That's freedom. Yeah. But first of all, we see this. We have to feel the way we're shut out. Yeah, and feel it in a way that it starts to open into something else. And in Rilke's poem in German, he says, diese Mühsal durch not ungetane schwer und wie gebunden insogern. No, sorry, that's a different poem. That's another poem of freedom and release. That's called Der Schwan. This poem is, sein Blick ist vom Vorübergehen der Stäbe so müde geworden, dass nichts mehr hält. From seeing the bars, his seeing is so exhausted that he no longer sees anything anymore. From seeing the bars, sein Blick ist vom Vorübergehen der Stäbe so müde geworden, dass nichts mehr hält. Ihm ist, als ob es 1000 Stäbe gäbe und hinter 1000 Stäbe keine Welt. From seeing the bars, he's seeing that he no longer sees anything anymore. To him, the world is bars, and behind the bars, no world. Yeah. In the original German, you have these flat umlaut sounds. So as you say them, sein Blick ist vom Vorübergehen der Stäbe so müde geworden, dass es nichts mehr hält. Ihm ist, als ob es 1000 Stäbe gäbe und hinter 1000 Stäbe keine Welt. You get the taste of metal in your mouth, actually, from those flat umlaut sounds, repeated. It's that taste you get the one time as a child that you lick metal. And you don't need to do it again for the rest of your life because you have that taste in your mouth. The taste of metal. What is it? What physically do you feel both at the center of your body and between you and the world, between you and your work, between you and your loved ones, that is refusing to speak to you, refusing to move? Yeah. All the great contemplative traditions say you can't break through it quickly. You have to settle into a relationship with it. And in many ways, you've got to feel the single malt essence of your own immovability and your own reluctance. We often think of self-knowledge as finding out what our virtues and our powers are, which is what a lot of positive thinking does, but positive thinking tends to be quite shallow because it doesn't take into account all the ways we're terrified of the world as we're saying all those positive things to ourselves. Yeah. But the invitation to understand all the ways you're reluctant to bring those powers to bear in the world, yeah, this is the real invitation to the center of the immovability, to starting to move that immovability into the world. I often think that addiction is always a rearguard action against our powers. Yeah. Addiction is the repeating of our troubles in a way, the things that trouble us. We keep inviting them in because they do actually stop us from maturing. Yeah. And quite often we're terrified of maturing into our full artistic and conversational and emotional powers because it feels like you're dying. You know very well who you are, you know where your limits are, you've made those limits, you shape them every day. When they start to fall apart and dissolve, it's not just a progression of movement into maturity. You actually feel as if you're dying. You don't know what's going to support you in the future. After I experienced that earthquake in Ecuador all those years ago, the invitation was to live on this earth in a different way, actually, a way that I wasn't ready for at the time. And I had to go deeply into my gut and my stomach for a week. I was in bed, actually, in a small hostelry for a week in northern Ecuador, unable to get up, directly out of this physical experience of things that I thought would always support me and could be taken for granted being taken away. So all of us, as we grow into this life, have this trauma and difficulty of things being taken away that we're sure we can't live without. People we love, circumstances, a school we loved, a teacher we love being replaced with a teacher who's vindictive or doesn't like us, who is a bad teacher perhaps. All of us at one time or another say, if this is the conversation you want me to have, God, I'm not having it, actually. I'm going to retreat inside this world I've made for myself. The face in the stone is a mirror looking into you. You have gazed at the moving waters. You have seen the slow light in the sky above Lokaina. Beneath you, streams have flowed and rivers of earth have moved beneath your feet. But you have never looked into the immovability of stone like this, the way it holds you, gives you not a way forward, but a doorway in, staunches your need to leave, becomes faithful by going nowhere. Something that wants you to stay here and look back. Be weathered by what comes to you. Be weathered by what comes to you. Like the way you too have come from so far away to be here, once reluctant, now as solid and as here and as willing to be touched as everything you have found. You could say, that deep attention to anything, whether it's inside yourself or outside yourself, is the willingness to be touched by what you see.